Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Expert Insight Live. Uh, we've got Logan with us today, and if you have any queries during the session, please add them to the live chat, as the ticker says at the bottom, and we will pick them up during the session. Logan, why not just start the session by a small introduction about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Tushar, thanks for having me. This is gonna be great. For folks who don't know me, my name is Logan Kilpatrick. I do developer relations at OpenAI. Really focused on helping enable developers who are using our API, and also focused on helping developers who are building ChatGPT plugins. We have this whole new ChatGPT plugin infrastructure and store that's live today. So supporting developers on that vertical as well.
Nice. Uh, Thanks a lot for the introduction, Logan. If all of you can hear us, it would be great if you can just add it in the chat. We don't want to be just talking to ourselves. Just to confirm that we are actually live. I can see that we are. But while we're waiting for your queries to come in, and do let us know where you're from, where you're watching this from. So while we're waiting for the comments to come in, I have a few queries for you, Logan. I'll start with the most basic one, and I'll enter it in the chat here so I can pop it up on screen. Uh, what is GPT and how does it work for a layman person like me?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think GPT is not common vernacular, so it's good to go through it. Also, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Transformers are the architecture of the large language model revolution. It's like an architecture for machine learning that's designed, optimized for natural language processing. So when people are referring to GPT, at least in the context of OpenAI, they're referring to large language models, usually ones that have been trained by OpenAI specifically. And again, large language models are just trained on a large corpus of text. And this is a really good intuition to have for people who are using systems like ChatGPT. The main structure of GPT models, the goal is to, given some text, predict the next token, which is just a sequence of characters in that line of text. So the models, if you start to think about like what are the models doing today, et cetera, they really don't have this like worldview that we do, or they don't have like goals and objectives and things like that. They really just have the ability to generate the next token in a sequence. So it's good to have that intuition as you're thinking about the limitations of these systems as well.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for that, Logan. And thanks everyone for confirming that we are actually heard and we are live. We have quite a lot of people joining in. We've got Lalit from Bangalore. Thank you, Storm, for confirming that you can actually hear us. We have a first query in. Do you want to take this one, or I have another one? I'll be more than glad to ask you the next one.
Yeah, sure. We can take the one that's coming in. I think it's from David in the chat right now.
So Dave is our CEO at Pact, and he's inquired, Logan, how should teams think about the choice of LLMs for their own projects? OpenAI versus open source versus other providers. What are the key decision drivers as you see it today?
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions and trade-offs to make, like when you're making any of these types of decisions in the software world. I think one of the biggest ones today is just around like model capabilities. I do think that, at least from a lot of things that I've seen, if you're looking at like robustness and reliability and cost perspective, those are the huge ones. Also thinking about like how well does something that I use, one of these large language models, actually scale up in production? Like, could it actually work for my production use case, or would it just become cost prohibitive, or like there's not enough infrastructure to run it? Those are some of the things that I think people are thinking about today. I would also posit that probably more and more people are going to think about like the actual tooling from a programming perspective that have been built around a specific ecosystem. Like, I think LangChain is a good example of this, where they've built this amazing first class experience for OpenAI models and other large language models providers. And I'm guessing that like as these tools continue to develop, companies and developers are going to naturally choose to go which option like has the best developer tooling, which is kind of like a normal trend across the tech industry. So yeah, lots of things to think about. David, happy to chat offline as well if you're interested.
Yep, that would be great. We've got another question from David Humler. Should I pop that up, or are you happy
Yeah, we
for me
can
to?
look at David's next question. Yeah.
Okay, so David inquires, what are your thoughts on LLM math capabilities? Some say it's an emergent feature of LLMs. Do you think GPT-4 or a future iteration will be able to provide calculating capabilities natively?
Yeah, this is a good question. So again, for folks who aren't familiar, we were going back to that question around, or we were talking about GPT models and how they actually work under the hood. The ability to generate the next sequence of tokens is not the same as being able to actually do math. I would guess that over time, what ends up making the most sense is sort of these hybrid systems where you have something that perhaps has some actual computational ability, and you can imagine something like OpenAI's code interpreter, which is built into ChatGPT, plus the actual like base model, and having that actually do mathematical capabilities. I don't think that just like the architecture of large language models aren't super well suited to like actually do math stuff. It's pretty good in a lot of situations, which is really weird. At least to me, it's super weird that it works well for a lot of things, but generally you would probably want something else to like actually run the numbers and not make an educated guess, which is essentially what's happening today.
I think all these chatbot assistants till date are really good with essay writing capabilities and helping us reduce our research purposes, at least for sure.
Yeah,
Thanks
100%.
to you and your team for that. There is another query. Do you want to have a look at that one?
I'll pass on David's other question. David, happy to follow up offline on that, but don't want to speak.
Okay, I'll put my query up next. So what are the key applications of GPT and other OpenAI models?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think it's sort of transitioned over time. I think if you had looked at who is using these models, perhaps like six months ago, maybe like 12 to 18 months as well, it was really focused on initially on a bunch of different copywriting, marketing, copywriting type workflows. And we saw this with Jasper AI is a great example of this, a super great company using our models to do a bunch of really cool stuff and like giving a unique interface and helping people. I was a customer of Jasper AI before I joined OpenAI and heard about ChatGPT. So I was already playing around with the technology and was actually blown away. I think they've done a really good job of setting their product up. But yeah, those were the initial use cases. Now we've sort of seen with ChatGPT the explosion of like these chatbot experiences, lots of customer service types of things. I actually think it's been, it's continuing to change as like function calling in our API, which allows the model to no longer just output text, but actually output the name of a function, like a programmatic function, and the arguments to pass to that function. So the model can now do like essentially say, hey, I can't answer that question, but I know you told me that certain programming functions exist, like maybe like checking the weather or checking, the map location or something like that. And it can dynamically send you the function signature so that you can call those functions under the hood. So now I think that the capabilities are expanding significantly. Those are the basic like text in, text out examples. We also have an image model, which is DALL-E. We have our speech to text model, which is Whisper. So really sort of building an entire intelligence layer, which is super cool.
Nice. Thanks for that, Logan. Lalit says that ChatGPT also writes code for me, also fixes bugs. I am aware of. Sorry,
one of the best use cases. Whenever I'm programming and something's not working as I would expect, I just copy in the error messages and stuff like that, and ChatGPT helps me get it done, which is super helpful.
Yeah, I am aware of quite a lot of my friends who work within the industry, and whenever they have any bugs, ChatGPT is their go-to. And the organizations have even adopted Code Interpreter as one of the tools that they use now, but it really helps all of them on the team.
Yeah, code interpreter is
Now,
crazy.
yeah. Uh, David has been thanking you for the query that you answered, and he says that for calculation solutions at the back end, he uses SymPy behind the scenes.
I love it.
Are you happy with the other queries? Which one are you happy with? I'll pop that for you.
I think both of these are okay to answer.
Okay, I'll pop up David's first. So Dave inquires, what's your view on the active user base for OpenAI right now? How much of today's activity is experimentation, exploration, and how much is live deployment?
Yeah, this is a good question. I have no sense of what the actual numbers look like. My sort of my intuition is that there's all, I mean, truthfully, there's a lot of people experimenting. I think this is probably more true now than ever with ChatGPT, and how, like, previously you would have had to create a developer account on our API site and like go through all this stuff to like try out this technology. And now ChatGPT has made it so that it's like a super simple way to do this. You can go in, play around with it, see what the actual capabilities of large language models are. So I'm thinking there's probably a very large number of people who are doing this experimentation. I think with that said, there's also a ton of people who are taking this technology into production today. Yeah, there's, I think it's, if you follow along with, if you just search OpenAI on LinkedIn, I'm sure you'll find like hundreds of different companies that are posting about, some new feature or some like new revolution of their platform that's being powered by our models. So it is, which I think is probably, if you look at a bunch of technology trends in general, I think the adoption of large language models, like in actual products that people use every day, comparatively against like some of the other previous tech trends, whether it's Web3 or crypto or other examples like that, it's incredible to see like how widely adopted this technology already is, and we're like less than a year into the transition. So it's going to be crazy to think in like 2 or 3 years how every little thing that we're doing is powered by AI and is using this technology. So it's it's going to be crazy.
Thanks, Logan. I'll pop up the next one. So Nilesh inquires that, are there any tech insights on why ChatGPT was introduced? Did the team found any sort of loopholes in the tech, or this was just an innovation?
Yeah, Nilesh, this is an interesting question. So there's been a bunch of people who have probably given a better sort of story about ChatGPT than I'll give here. But the sort of general context is, at the time that ChatGPT was being worked on, OpenAI already had GPT-4 trained, and the team was using it internally. This was before I joined, and essentially, the team was seeing what was possible with GPT-4, and we had this little like internal demo, which was ChatGPT, and like people were like, "Oh, this is kind of cool," but like we have GPT-4 internally, so like no one was really that excited about ChatGPT, like the internal preview version. And then some of the teams just decided, hey, this is something that we should get out into the world and see what people's reaction is. And that's why it was originally, and I think it is still framed today as this, but ChatGPT is a research preview. It was intended to just showcase, here's what's possible with the technology. And part of the reason for that, again, going back to, we didn't talk about it yet, but OpenAI's mission, part of the core mission is to iteratively deploy this technology to the world so that the world understands, like, here's what this technology is capable of and can adapt as the technology changes. And I think, again, it's not great for everyone if OpenAI just like sits behind the scenes, doesn't talk to anyone, and just like develops crazy AI technology and then just releases it to the world in like a super disruptive way. This idea of iterative deployment is core to the strategy, which I think is super important. So you'll continue to see this over time.
Great. And yeah, I do understand, while OpenAI has released the model as well, there are a lot of people who've been doing numerous things with the models. They've been finding out newer ways of how to apply them in their own line of work. So it's just a great thing to see that OpenAI is not limiting them uh, into how it can be utilized. There are quite a lot of queries. Which one do you want to take first after Nilesh's?
Yeah, we can just start with Rish's.
Okay. So Rishi inquires, do you have any insights how enterprises are using GPT other than chatbots?
Yeah, I think other than chatbots, it's like more of a traditional completion style. So historically, we had our completions endpoint, which is like you just give it a bunch of text and it essentially like completes the text completions. And now we have something called chat completions, which is again sort of a little bit more optimized, not in every way, but a little bit more optimized for this like message in, message out conversation type flow. So I think for people who aren't doing like normal chat use cases, they're using chat completions actually to do more like completion style. So this could be like essentially think about like fancy autocomplete essentially. So like you know you start typing something and then if you use like Gmail before or any of these other or even like on your iPhone for example, it like guesses what words are going to come next and like lets you pre-populate it. People are doing a lot of that with like a you know a bunch of different twists on it where it's not like actually just autocomplete but it's something a little bit cooler. Or I saw the other day someone's using people are using the models to do a lot of like analysis of text. So one example is for like blog posts, you know, you can like copy and paste your or like use this AI feature to like highlight the title of your blog post and then like get feedback essentially from the model to be like, is this an optimal thing? Is this going to attract the most readers and like deliver on you know the message that you're trying to tell people? So lots of cool things like that, which I think are super helpful for people who are writing in that case.
Thanks. Should I take up the one from Maulik next?
Yes, this should be good to answer.
Okay. So Maulik inquires on YouTube that one thing I always wonder is ChatGPT remembers what we asked it before, and after a week, if we ask a new question related to the previous one, it gives related answers.
Yeah, this is a good question. So if we're talking about in the context of ChatGPT, the model each message thread is like a completely independent instance. So the model has no idea that you have all these other conversations, which is actually one of the limitations of ChatGPT today. Where it's like, you know, again, it doesn't have any context of what you've talked about. So it might repeat some of that information or give you a completely different thing or forget that you told it some important thing in a different conversation and it does not remember that in the new one. So those conversations are independent of each other. If you're using the API, it's the same way. You have to essentially pass all of the information continually back to the model that you want the model to like have awareness of. And there's a bunch of different ways of doing this, and we can talk more about it if folks have questions. But yeah, essentially, you need to pass in all the information that you want in every new instance that you're talking to the model today.
Thanks. Matthew is inquiring about generative AI's accuracy. Do you think it will catch up to its confidence level?
Yeah, Matthew, this is a great question. Generally, there's fundamental, you know, there's limitations with large language models. One of them is the accuracy. That being said, GPT-4 was on the benchmark that we have available to us, ended up with a 40% improvement in factualness, which is an awesome sort of trend line between GPT 3.5 Turbo and GPT-4. So hopefully that trend continues, and a bunch of details around this are in the GPT-4 technical report. So if you haven't read it, it's kind of dense. It's like 100 pages, but it's definitely worth it. And there's a bunch of like really interesting examples and discussion about this accuracy and confidence trade-off. But yeah, in general, the models can be confident and wrong at the same time, which is kind of like not the best combination that you're looking for. But yeah, I'm expecting that this will improve over time.
I think Abhijit has quite an amazing query over here. He inquires that AI is rapidly transforming the world of work, automating tasks and creating new opportunities. How will AI impact the future of work? What skills will be in demand? And how can we ensure that everyone benefits from the AI revolution?
Yeah, this is a great question. On the latter point, that's part of why OpenAI exists, is to make sure that these benefits end up helping everybody. As far as how AI will impact the future of work, I think it depends on sort of the time horizon scale. I think in the next few years, the reality will be that people are going to use AI systems like ChatGPT and others to be more effective at the work that they're doing, whether they're a developer or a writer. Um, and I'm feeling that already today as somebody who's writing code. Like, I use ChatGPT to help me work on tech stacks that I'm much less familiar with, and like now I'm able to make some contributions, whereas previously, if I didn't know React or I didn't know some framework, like it would be really a difficult lift for me to make some contribution. I think that's going to change, and I think it's going to give people the freedom to actually build more things that are interesting and impactful. So I'm excited that as far as skills that are in demand, I really do think that it's much of the same stuff, like a curiosity, a willingness to build things, a willingness to try things. I think that again, over time, like your human to human skills are going to become much more important. Yeah, and I think, like, again, it's all of these things are true today, and I don't think a lot of it is going to fundamentally change, at least in like the short to medium term.
Pankaj inquires, is it possible to integrate ChatGPT to my website through the APIs?
Yeah, you definitely can. So we have a Node.js repository. There's other third-party unofficial SDKs for other tool sets if you're not using Node.js. But yeah, you definitely can. You could build your own. It isn't exactly ChatGPT. You're essentially building your own version of ChatGPT directly into your website using the APIs. But yeah, it comes with, it's a trade-off, but also comes with a bunch of nice features and value add that you don't have as much flexibility inside of ChatGPT. And when you use the API, you can be a little bit more flexible with the system message and a bunch of the settings around how the model interacts with queries from users and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. Definitely check it out.
Logan, if you can just check out the other query from Dave, if that is something that you're comfortable answering. If not, I'll move on to the next one from Lalit.
Yeah, I'll pass on this again, but happy to answer the following question after that.
Okay. So the next query is from Lalit on YouTube. What steps are necessary to bring ChatGPT up to date with the current state of the bird?
It's a good question. I think the challenge historically has been that it takes a long time to train these models and like do a training run and make it accessible to make that information accessible to the model. For example, GPT-4 finished training, like the model is actually done being trained 6 months before we actually released it. So even if it had all the up to date information when it was finished training, there was still that 6 month period of us doing the testing and the safety work to make this actually work well. For developers who are thinking about this same question of, I have some information that I want ChatGPT to have access to, and I want to sort of integrate that information with our API. The simple way to do this for developers is use embeddings. You can take a bunch of the content that you think is relevant for your users to have access to, embed it, which is the process of just like taking text, putting it into a numerical format, and then you can do essentially semantic search, where the user could enter in a query. You could check your vector database to see whether or not there's some relevant information to give to the user. If there's not, you could just have the model respond with whatever answer it thinks is best. If there is, you can sort of give them that like up-to-date answer that matches whatever your use case is. And again, you could imagine if you were powering like a customer support service or something like that on your website, maybe you give it access to like all the recent releases and stuff like that. So embeddings are the way of doing this today.
Nilesh is thanking you for answering his query. And he says that it has opened quite a lot of doors for everyone in every industry. It will surely save a lot of time and cost. There are a couple of queries below that as well. Which one do you want me to pop up on screen?
Yeah, David's asking all the good questions. I'm happy to give a quick answer to David's question. If you want to, yeah.
Yeah. So David inquires, what risks are there that over time the process of safety training reduces the actual value of GPT, so it reverts to a kind of a generic mean?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I do think that there's, and I think others have commented on this, there is some loss of functionality, to whatever degree is much more questionable, through a lot of these like different processes, and not even like specifically from a safety lens, but from making the model more likely to output answers that are like useful to humans. Like you lose a little bit of stuff when you like do some of um, this reinforcement learning with human feedback. I do think that it's like an active area of thought. Like I think a lot of people have this question, and I think it's a focus. Like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do are make models that are super useful to people, and make models that are really safe to use. So I do think that's going to continue to be a focus, and I'm personally not super worried about it, because again, our goal is, if the models become super generic and not useful, then it doesn't really help anybody at the end of the day. So it needs to strike that balance. So I'm optimistic that we'll find the right balance. I also think that, when the models become super generic, that's when perhaps fine tuning becomes super useful, and you can take a bunch of the data and information about what's a relevant and useful use case for you, and make it accessible to, yeah, make the model more likely to do the things that are important to you.
Nilesh has a follow-up query. Should school students of this generative AI generation, should they know the basic concepts of it, uh, as the future stuff might evolve in lightning speed?
Yeah, I think my assumption is, and this is based on everything that's happening today, the basics and the fundamentals of the technology that's powering generative AI, like transformers and all the machine learning, deep learning stuff, has not actually fundamentally changed in the last 5 years or whatever. It's really just like access to more compute, some different like training processes with RLHF, things like that have come out. So you can definitely learn the fundamentals of this technology and not have to worry about that it's going to be outdated in the next 6 months. Really, I think much of the innovation that's happening today is around like use cases and like more data, less data, whatever it is. Like it's nothing super fundamental. You could definitely learn the basic concepts and be well off for the next few years.
There are more queries in the chat. If you want to have a look at it, I'll pop up the ones that you can answer. So just to inform all the live audience, there are certain restrictions from OpenAI on sharing some information. That's the reason why Logan is just being careful.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, we can answer David's question. Yeah, hard to share things about future roadmaps. I think, generally for model improvements, like things that we care about that are top of mind, and this is actually based on feedback from developers, like the steerability of the models. Like I think one huge ask that people are always coming to us with is like, hey, I want the model to output things in a very specific format that's like well suited for my use case. This could be like, I want the model to generate JSON output, for example. And the model can do that pretty well today, but it's, there's times when it doesn't work really well. So that's something that's top of mind. Improve the steerability. There's lots of other work streams based on feedback from people. Like sometimes, folks are want the models to be more concise in a lot of cases. And again, that kind of goes back to the steerability as well with our API, where, for certain use cases, you might not want it to seem like it's a chat conversation. You just kind of want the answer to the query that you put in. So we're definitely working on that, and hopefully a lot of the direction and priorities will be continued to be informed by the feedback that people are giving us. So thanks to everyone who's giving that feedback. I'm always looking on Twitter and our developer forum and things like that for comments that people have coming in.
Nice. Should I pick up the next one or the one after?
We'll skip the next one just because I don't really understand the question.
Okay. So Pedram inquires, do you have any comments on how enterprises will leverage LLMs in their future applications?
Yeah, I'm guessing people will lean more into this like chat first experience. Like I'm guessing, instead of having like a really, really complicated UI where you have to like select a bunch of filters and different buttons and stuff like that, like you can just show up in your application and just ask in plain, like oftentimes we as humans know, like we know the question we're trying to answer. It's a question of, it's then like, how do we take the question we're trying to answer and then articulate it in a way that translates to some like web UI flow with like a bunch of different buttons and things like that. And what would really be best is like, I can just take my question and then ask it to this chat session. And then the chat session is the sort of intermediary between all of the complexity of some enterprise application. So I'm really excited about this as somebody who just uses tools all day, where like I won't have to like be an expert on how to use, insert whatever tool it is that you use on a regular basis. And you can kind of just do the thing that you want, say it in plain English, like it's being processed in your brain, and just have that thing happen.
I think the next one, you may want to skip it.
Yep,
or
we'll skip the next one.
Okay. Dave has a good suggestion for you. Should I pop that up?
Yeah, we can skip David's comment. Thank you, David.
So Dave is a big fan of OpenAI approach of ship first and then adapt, learn later, do backfill the context, risk management. The alternative, yep, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I will say that the idea that OpenAI is taking a ship first approach, I don't think is necessarily true. Like again, GPT-4 is a great example of this. Like the model was available 6 months, was done training 6 months before, and like that's really when the work started for us of like doing all the safety training, all the safety work and things like that. So there is a lot of thoughtfulness put into when to ship things. I think sort of independent of the actual releases of our models, I think for like a platform side, whether it's ChatGPT or API, I think that's where this kind of ship first mentality can really be implemented, because it's the problem space is much different. Like again, if we ship some feature that doesn't end up being super useful in ChatGPT or API, like there's not a ton of downside to that. I think if we ship a model that has a bunch of dangerous capabilities or something like that, that's potentially much more problematic. So I think the mindset applies in certain cases and perhaps not in others.
Great. I think there is an interesting query from a LinkedIn user. They say, hey Logan, there's a lot of nervous chatter about the end of work with AI. How do you calm folks down when they feel that GenAI is coming for their jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it today is sort of just like kind of like clickbaity type stuff, where like people are trying to garner views and interest. I think the reality is, for a great example of this is like software engineering. The model today can write pretty good code in a lot of cases. And I think the capabilities will continue to improve over time. But does that mean at the end of the day that the software engineering jobs are going to go away? Like I'm not convinced by that personally. I think if you understand the true scope of what somebody who's doing software engineering actually does, it's unlikely that the model will be able to do those things. Like it can't. At least in the foreseeable future that I see. I think that these tools, like the reality is they will augment what we do. Like it'll be super helpful to have this amazing assistant that can help you do things that you're excited about and help you do them better and faster than you were able to do before, and perhaps make it so that you don't have to do the things that you're not super excited about doing. I think that's more likely to be the world that we are moving towards in the short to medium term. And again, it's this going back to the comment about iterative deployment. I think making this technology accessible to people so that everyone can sort of think about this for themselves and understand the limitations and the capabilities of these models, I think is going to be super important.
Logan, do you want to comment on LangChain? The next question is about LangChain. Do you want to comment?
Sure, happy to generally comment on it.
Okay, so what are the deployment limitations as well as application limitations of LangChain currently?
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, LangChain is just a tool built. It's an open source project built by a bunch of different folks in the large language model ecosystem. Some of the deployment limitations today, I think, with our API specifically, what I think about for our API is it's really like a bare metal large language model API, where essentially we don't provide a lot of tooling. We really just provide the input and output functionality, like the actual models themselves. So if you want to do things like monitoring or helping with deployment, like deployment items and things like that, our API doesn't do any of that today. So you really do need to, if you want to do those things, you would have to, build them yourself or use an off-the-shelf open source or commercial tool. And LangChain is one of those people who's building in both of those spaces. So ideally, and again, just like as a developer who's building with large language models myself, I'm excited to see like more and more tools and things like that come out, just because it makes working with the technology much easier.
Okay, there are a few more queries, and in fact, even I've added one more. I'll just pop up on screen the one that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, happy to. We can put it up.
Which one is it? Is it Radu's comment or David's comment?
We can start with David's comment. Okay.
So David says that Logan, as OpenAI responds to developer demands, will this lead to an every richer set of core services like, say, Windows than AWS does? Or is there an internal view that OpenAI is the Linux kernel with a very defined core that allows an ecosystem to develop around it?
Yeah, this is a really good question, David. I think so. If you think about the core work that OpenAI is trying to do, it's really trying to provide this general intelligence layer. Does that mean that we won't go and build a bunch of features and things like that? No, we will probably continue to develop, new features, new models, et cetera, et cetera. But it does mean that like there is a big opportunity for people who are building businesses that are in vertical applications. Like, you can insert whatever the specific vertical is, but there's huge opportunities for people who are building with those things. And again, those people are all our customers for the most part, who are using our models in those vertical industries. Like we're trying to build this general purpose assistant AI to help people. I think there's probably people who are going to build things that are, again, like very specialized in different use cases. That's my general answer.
Okay. All right, Logan, so you've been on live for quite a bit now. So let's take a couple of last two queries before we call it a wrap.
Sure.
You can tell me which queries to pop up and I'll do that.
We can do the question that you put in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So how far away does it look like we are from the AI models being able to develop themselves?
It's another good question. I think it really depends on what you mean by develop themselves. Like the models can have, and I think people have sort of proved this out with different agents frameworks. for folks who aren't familiar with agents, it's like the ability to sort of give the model goals and let it sort of do things iteratively instead of just like one input out, one input, one output, and like a sort of linear chain. So you probably could string together some agent workflow today where like the model technically like goes and like quote unquote improves itself over time, something like that. I think the challenge is that, it's probably not very good at doing that. It is kind of going to just like make a bunch of random decisions that probably like don't make a ton of sense. They're not very thoughtful. So I do think that like a lot of, we're probably a ways away from this happening. I think, yeah, and like some like really lightweight use cases for some like simple, easy, like, computer vision tasks, as an example, you could maybe build something like this in the next couple of years where the model sort of takes in some inputs and sort of improves itself over time. I think for like larger scale, like robust systems, specifically for large language model systems, it's maybe farther away just because there's more complexity.
Thank you so much for that, Logan. And there are a couple, in fact, there are 3 more queries. So which one do you want to take as the last one?
We can do Nilesh's question.
Okay. So is OpenAI going to launch a certification or accreditation for OpenAI Solutions Architect or OpenAI Certified Developer Advocate?
Yeah, Nilesh, this is a good question. I think it's not something that we have right now, but I do think that it would be useful for people to be able to sort of certify that they have some experience. I know we do have, if folks have used Upwork before, just like a platform for freelancing, there is some specific program on Upwork where you can get sort of certified as, and I don't know the exact terminology, but like a certified OpenAI solutions provider if you're doing that type of freelancing work. So maybe not directly relevant for everybody, but definitely something that we're thinking about, so that developers can show they know how to build large language model systems.
Thanks, Logan. So before we close, do you want to give any closing conclusions about where do you see generative AI heading? What's next? What should we expect? And any thoughts, any notes for everyone attending?
Yeah, I appreciated all these questions. Lots of super thoughtful questions. Apologies on the ones that that I wasn't able to answer. Hopefully, can answer things offline if there's other questions. Again, I'm really excited about this space because there's so much cool possibility, and I don't think that we're like anywhere close to seeing, how much impact this technology is going to have. So as somebody who likes building things, I'm excited. Like I'm always thinking, on the weekends about what are the cool things that people should be building. So if you're in this space and you're building things as a developer, feel free to get in touch with me. Always happy to help and give folks suggestions. If you're a developer building with our API, we have an awesome developer forum where folks can come and ask questions and hang out and see cool things that other people are building. So I would encourage you to join and check it out. It's just community.openai.com. Yeah, that's all I have. Tushar, thanks for hosting this. It was great. And hopefully it was useful for people.
Thank you so much, Logan. Thank you, everyone. I'll meet you backstage, Logan, in a bit. Thank you, everyone, for attending and asking these amazing queries that you had. Hopefully, I'll see you soon as well. Thank you.